All right, good evening. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Donna Downing, and along with Heather Tutta, we are proud to kick off a series of PTA Council Parent University workshops to help parents in our district understand our school's academic programs. Rather than a one-night conference-style event, as we've done in the past, this year we're breaking up our topics into a series of shorter presentations, which you can also view at home after the events. I am required to inform you, for those of you here in the audience, that this event is being recorded and will be posted publicly, just so you're aware. We have index cards and pens to hand out if you have topics that you would like to see covered at future workshops. We're planning elementary school math and reading nights in the near future, and we'll keep you posted on those plans. Tonight's topic is called Intro to Southside High School Programs. We welcome John Murphy, principal at Southside, and Ben Moss, assistant principal. They will give us an academic overview of the goals, choices, as well as the various paths that students elect here at the high school. We have limited time tonight, so let me hand it over to Mr. Murphy and Mr. Moss.
Thank you, and hi, and thank you for coming. So the envisionment of the series was a repeat of what we did about 3 years ago, which was a parent university on a different topic, but it was a series of small roundtables and seminar-like discussions about different facets of the high school. We'd like to replicate this both in person and through recordings, so some of them might be out of sequence. The envisionment for this brief opening plenary would be the introduction at a parent university. So normally a parent university, everyone would meet in the auditorium, we'd introduce the topics and the sequences, and then people would go out for more specific niche-like discussions. So that's the envisionment of this, is an opening introduction to the high school in a broad, holistic sense, to take a look at the scope, the sequence, the options that are available, which will then be followed by more specific, detailed explications of the various program sequences and options that are available to us. They're also out of order. These will all be created on the school website as a compendium, as a resource file, as a series of events to use at your disposal, to have at your will, to cross-reference, so that it's a compendium of information for you. Some of them are more dense than others. So here's our introduction. Whether you are an elementary school, high school, middle school parent, welcome and thank you. So the focus here that Mr. Moss and I would like to explore are the academic portions of the high school, knowing that there is a broad array of experiences at the high school that we will not include. Similarly, the options and programs that we're going to discuss couldn't possibly deal with every single possibility, but we're dealing with the philosophy underlying our decision-making processes, the scope and sequence of the courses, the options that are available to students, and the outcomes that we have experienced thus far, knowing that we are in a state of change. The needs of the students today are different than they were 10 years ago, will be different again 10 years from now. So as we're evolving and making adjustments, ours is an attempt to make sure that you have the information that you need, and that we're changing coming from a place of where we are, not where we think we are. And when the changes occur, we understand the intended and the long-term consequences of each of those changes, to make sure that they're very deliberate, methodical, and that the students are being thought of first. So the goals underlying all of the decisions that we're about to talk about and the scope and sequence are driven by the following, and these aren't necessarily in order, but they are some of the guiding principles of the district. When deciding a scope and sequence for a student, an individual student as well as the student body, our goal is to ensure that the options that are available here for every student prepares them for life after Southside, meaning when they have choices and decisions to make after 12th grade or when they depart here, I want those to be real decisions and real options that aren't limited by their experiences or lack of experiences at the high school. Similarly, when they leave here, they should know their areas of relative strengths and relative weaknesses. So the experience should be an authentic and real look so that the student has a good positive sense of where they are as a student, as a learner, and as a citizen. We're also going to make sure that irrespective of where the student ends up, whether it's a university, a work experience, or a combination of both, that they're prepared for the expectations, both with regard to content, work ethic, skills, and life experiences, so that there are always going to be surprises in life, but it wouldn't be through lack of preparedness that the students are ready for them. We also have to advocate, and we'll talk more about this when we talk into schedules, about balance. There's a wide spectrum of student choices. And in today's day and age, sometimes we need to save students from themselves, and that they want to do everything all the time at maximum capacity, which is great, and for some students that's an outstanding choice. We have to make sure that we're aware of the drivers of those decision-making processes, and the student has as balanced an experience in their high school as humanly possible to balance health, wellness, their own individual likes and dislikes, and what they're gravitating toward, with that notion of balance in their lives. And similarly, we're also a high school, which is a delicate ecosystem, to ensure that when students are navigating their way through the four-year experience, that they have an opportunity to explore and investigate those areas of special interest to them and to explore them fully, while at the same time experiencing the richness of the student body, and wherever possible, experience heterogeneity, meaning the classrooms that they are in should reflect, wherever possible, the demographics of the student body as wherever possible, so that the diversity of thought, diversity in terms of background, are an experience and an opportunity for them to avail of.
Thanks, Mr. Murphy. So I wanted to do something a little fun to sort of just demonstrate visually what a student at Southside, sort of based on their choices, based on their interests, what options do they have available? So I created this little tree, the Southside tree, and the three students that I'm just going to use as an example, Harry, Hermione, and Ron. Many of you probably recognize those names. I happen to be in the middle of reading all the Harry Potter books with my daughter, so it's like fresh on my mind. I felt like this was a good way to go. So I'll take Harry to start. Let's say Harry is a student who might be interested in social studies and construction and technology. We'll go back to Harry in a minute, but those are his general interests. Hermione might have theater and science, and Ron maybe English and visual art. So what do those mean more specifically? Well, we'll go back to Harry. He's interested in social studies. What might he take? He might take an economics course. He might take psychology. He might take IB film. And as far as his construction and technology interest, TV production, wood design. And again, when we go through this, we'll talk about how any of these students can really be any of their own branches and taking all different sorts of courses. Mr. Murphy later will talk about diplomas, what those mean, and a little bit about how all of these lead towards very specific Regents diplomas, and there's New York State requirements. But they can all be covered within these students' choices and interests. So Hermione, she's interested in theater. Well, she'll probably be in our IB theater program and take play production. And in her sciences, she might take an IB chemistry course, and she might be in our science research program as well. Whereas Ron, anatomy and physiology as well for Hermione, another one of our electives in science. Ron might take creative writing as part of his English interest. He might take American Sign Language, public speaking, and his art. So he'll be in our IB art program. And through getting to IB art, he might have taken sculpture and ceramics along the way. But again, these are just some of the options. You branch that a little further. Well, what other classes are students may be taking who are on these branches or on other branches? Obviously, they'll be taking world languages, many of our students, Spanish and French, IB math analysis, IB music, contemporary issues, math advanced topics, photo, chem advanced, jazz ensemble. These are just some more. But maybe they're on a different branch, and they're taking a geometry lab course, accounting, IB biology, marine bio. They're a singer, they're in chamber singers. Or they're taking coding because they love technology also. And then you have students on a completely different branch. Some of them might be in, again, another world language, French. They might be in an IB English class. They might be also singing, but in Coraliers this time. They might have a special education academic enrichment course. All of our students are required to take health. Maybe they'll take IB business, AP calculus. But then you have even more branches: marketing, painting and drawing, SAT prep. I think you get the idea. There are so many different options and branches for students to go through. And who are we? I'll continue the metaphor. We're there to support them and through those choices, through those interests, through those successes and failures. And I don't mean failure in the academic sense. I mean more failures as see what you like and don't like. See what works, see what doesn't work. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what we're supposed to be supporting them through while receiving the holistic education that we all want for them. So now we're going to go through individual schedules, some samples of these, not just these 3 students, but a couple more students, of what their 4-year sequence will look like, period by period, course by course. So you get a real feel for what a student goes through academically and what courses they're taking throughout their high school experience. And we'll start with Ron.
So last Thursday, Ms. Nisler-Cross completed a workshop on the IB diploma program. So that's not going to be the focus here. If you do want a further in-depth look at that, it will be on the website. What we're really talking about now is the sequence that they're experiencing during high school, and then we'll talk about the outcomes. So we've already discussed the need for them to be as prepared as humanly possible while creating balance. What we're looking at the 4-year sequence is to make as concrete specific as possible our understanding of what we mean with the balance of heterogeneity versus specificity. The goal of which is to ask students not to specialize too early so that when they leave here, they have a breadth of experiences, but also that specific area of expertise where they may gravitate towards. The reason for that is varied, not the least of which is most of our students, approximately 88%, go right on to 4-year universities. In that university experience, they will take a broad liberal arts curricula. The goal is to have them as prepared as possible for each of those requirements. The second facet that is becoming increasingly prevalent is that students, over half of the students will switch majors, if not colleges, at the end of the 4-year experience. Should that happen, we'd like their high school experience at least to be a backdrop, so if they do switch, they know what other areas of interest they have and other areas of relative strength. So in our first example, Ronald Weasley, again, he's progressing through the 4-year experience and is dabbling in a variety of elective courses. So we have the 4 core classes: English, social studies, science, math, and world languages for most students. This student chose to take public speaking and painting and drawing. So he's looking into public speaking as well as the arts. Sophomore year, he takes American Sign Language, which is a brand new course here. It's a 1-year standalone course, as well as painting and drawing. So if you follow the painting and drawing sequence, this is a student who seems to have found his niche in our art sequences. They're not the only art sequences. There's sculpture and ceramics, photography, digital art, but he seems to be gravitating towards that niche. Similarly, and this is fairly typical, the student sees his middle school foreign language experience through to his senior year, and then takes the Regents level sciences, which go up to physics, possibly, and then he extends that with an IB Environmental Systems course. That is not the exclusive or only path that you can take in science. Suffice it to say, depending on what you call requirements, in terms of a Regents diploma, their science requirement, for all intents and purposes, is finished by the end of 9th grade. Our goal, though, is not just to fulfill the Regents requirements, is to make sure that the student has the experience necessary in the sciences to be not only scientifically literate, but to take those type of courses irrespective of what they do after high school. So we would always recommend that a student continue from living environment into chemistry and then physics. Once they enter physics, they can then specialize in other sciences that Mr. Moss will talk about And again, this student follows the traditional arc of math sequences where they end up, in this case, in a 2-year IB math course that is really an overview of, for a student who would be gravitating toward the social sciences, an introduction to statistics, an introduction to basic calculus, probability functions. It's a general math course that prepares them for post-secondary mathematics. This student, for all intents and purposes, exceeded the New York Regents requirements. This student would qualify for a Regents with Advanced designation and could be, if they so choose, an IB diploma candidate. There seems to be some confusion in terms of when we use the word diploma. There are the New York State diploma types that are granted, meaning a Regents diploma, a Regents with Advanced designation, a local diploma. Those are the New York State designated diploma types. An IB diploma is separate and completely different from that. It has nothing to do with the New York State diploma types and is a separate requirement for the student if they so choose to go that route for the most advanced coursework that we have. So in this first instance, here's a student with a fairly traditional coursework who's dabbled in other elective courses, seems to be gravitating toward the sciences, but we could have replaced that sequence with theater, with business, as we'll see later, as one of dozens of possibilities.
All right, we'll go back to Harry. So Harry's a different type of student. Harry's a student who, as we said before, might gravitate towards construction technology, things like that. Harry will go through and take all the New York State requirements as far as Regents go. So English will follow their way all the way through 12th grade. Science, Harry may decide after living environment and chemistry in 10th grade to move a different direction in sciences and take science electives, marine bio and forensics in 11th grade. Harry also chose after Spanish 4, they got their Regents requirement. I'm now going to focus in a different area. I'm not going to stay with the, he completed the Regents foreign language, the world language, and he's going to move on from world language. And you'll see the math, again, traditional sequence, geometry, algebra 2. He had some support classes for the geometry and the algebra support, but he was also interested in wood design and coding, as we mentioned earlier. Once you go on to 10th grade, morning news, TV prod, that's when you're starting to think about, all right, I really am interested in the construction and technology. I think I'm interested in a BOCES Barry Tech program. And what that would be a student who is so interested in this that they want to focus on a specific trade in carpentry. And BOCES Barry Tech has many different options, and that's this one student's option. And he chose, based on his interests, I want to go that direction. And that would be in 11th grade, half a day. So periods 1 through 4 would be taken up at a different site where he would take a bus to that other site at Barry Tech, and he'd be interested in taking those carpentry courses. He continued that in senior year in the second half of the day and finishing that sequence. But in addition, remember, he already completed all the requirements for a Regents, or in this case, an Advanced Regents diploma as well. Decided not to go into IB history, chose to do US History 11R, went in 12th grade to Contemporary Issues in Economics, which is the history for 12th graders who choose to go that route. In math, he chose a math concepts course in senior year. That is for seniors to prepare them for college-type math, but he didn't go the IB or AP route in the mathematics. This is also more typical also of students in our Pathways program might take a similar sequence to this. They might take Pathways classes 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade as far as their core requirements, but also go into a BOCES Barry Tech program. So this is just another option. This is another path that students may take. And I'll get into later, we're going to be discussing how many students in our current senior class choose to focus in these different areas. And you'll see general overview of sort of what the student body looks like at Southside. So this is one other option. John can now talk again about Hermione.
So, well, before we get to Hermione, let's take a little break. So we're going through these scope and sequences, and we could take a break and do a separate path on each of these. For instance, we're throwing around different diploma types here, local regions with advanced designation. Even that is now in a state of flux. So there have been the traditional route in which students arrange them, but the state is now revisiting even the mere existence of Regents exams. This is a 3 to 5 year project. They're exploring other options and availabilities. The last 3 years have been obviously different, but even within the current paradigm, there are any number of different ways and sequences through which a student can earn a Regents diploma or a Regents with advanced designation. Traditionally, it was the 5 basic Regents exams: English, Global Studies, U.S. History, Math, and a Science for a basic Regents diploma. But now there are different possibilities with that. This student, for instance, would also earn a CDOS credential, which is a career and trade credential. That can be used also as an assistance to earn a Regents diploma, but that's not really the driver. The driver is for this student really looking past high school in terms of what their strengths are. So we're talking about these diploma types, not necessarily as destinations, but as indicators of the level of preparedness that the student is experiencing before leaving here. Again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what students are exactly going to do, but we can prepare them as best as possible. Also understand that, I'm getting there, before we get to Harry, one of the things that we're revisiting due to the current circumstances, due to the changing dynamic in students, is the sequence of electives that we offer. Now, there's a balance between quantity and quality and class size and room accommodations, but we're looking long and hard at those accommodations and asking, do they need to evolve? And do we need more coding classes? There seems to be a strong gravitation toward business sequences, especially over the last 5 to 7 years, to the extreme, to the extent that we've added business teachers because of the student interest in that. We're constantly looking at that dynamic to see what we need to revisit and what other options that we have available to us to make sure that students can experience those electives and art classes as often as possible. Harry is like the other students that we have examined thus far, in that he has a lunch. That's something we're always going to advocate for in a student schedule. We can't make them, but I'm always going to say it's really important that you have a lunch. In today's hyper-competitive world, that can become an increasingly difficult conversation for a student by the time we get to 11th and 12th grade. And that's where the decisions have to be made. What's the cost of this schedule? And we'll talk more about them as it goes on. Every student has their own work ethic, their own workload that's associated with their schedule. I think it behooves us and all of us to look really intelligently and empathetically in terms of how much is enough and when the student should modify should the need arise. Again, we have to look at the drivers. So, am I on Hermione now?
You are.
So Hermione
No
is a student who has chosen no lunch despite our protestations. Now, students can eat lunch in the classroom, but that's not my point. In this case, the student didn't know where her interests were. So she started a sequence in music, in concert orchestra, but she's also very fascinated with science electives. So she took science research, which is an every other day elective, as well as anatomy and physiology, which is an extension of the living environment and biology curriculum. And then she dabbled throughout the next 2 years, whether it's in a theater arts course, concert orchestra, and then in 11th and 12th grade decided to turn it up a notch. The following sequence is one of the more challenging that we have here at the high school. This is it. This is a student who has taken pretty much the most difficult coursework that we have here. She's in BC Calculus, which is the more difficult of the 2 AP Calculus courses. She's decided to further pursue IB Theater into an academic. It's not just a performing art anymore. Now this is dramaturgy. This is set design. She's chosen to double up in science, and that she's taking chemistry and physics at the higher level. She's also an IB diploma candidate. If this is what makes Hermione happy, great. Outstanding. This is hard for even our strongest of students. So this is where we have the conversation and we make sure that the drivers are the students' legitimate interests or careers after Southside. This would be the student applying to those competitive universities. She also needs to understand that this is not the only way to get what she wants. In other words, sometimes balance is best. Do what you do supremely well and don't spread yourself too thin, but there are students who are not happy unless they're experiencing this. Again, this is a personalized experience.
Now I'll talk about myself for a minute. Let's pretend I'm a student. I was a student here at Southside High School several years ago, so let's pretend this was my my progression through the high school. So again, my interest, and this is actually was my interest at the time, was in business. So I started with some electives in career and financial management, and then 10th grade entrepreneurship. One other thing about Ben Moss, and this is not true for me, but true of this student, is he transferred into Rockwell Center from another state. So he didn't take algebra or science in 8th grade, and so he had to take earth science in 9th grade, and algebra 1 as well. So that just sort of changed a little bit his trajectory, but still gave him those same options as he went throughout his coursework. You'll see he still took the earth science, the living environment, the chemistry. He decided as a senior not to continue with those lab sciences and went on to marine biology, Long Island resources. His interest in business continued. He enrolled in our IB business program, year 1 and year 2, and he found an interest in psychology, which I guess is why I ended up in school counseling, psychology in 11th grade, as well as IB psychology in 12th grade. Those are his interests. That's where he wanted to focus. He still had to, and he still completed the requirements for the diplomas that Mr. Murphy discussed. But again, he had a different path. He was new to Rockwell Center. He was new to New York State. So he took a different path. Still a successful one. He still wanted to have lunch each year. And again, this is just one of many permutations. The same student could have had an additional free period in senior year if he chose not to take one of those electives. You know, there are those options as well. Some students want to have fewer classes because they know they're going to be so busy after school with clubs, activities, sports, a job, that they need to have a couple free periods in the day. And we recognize that as well, and students certainly have that option as they progress.
So therein lies that balance. Again, we've talked horizontally all along. We also could discuss vertically. In other words, what's the experience for each student, each individual grade, both in terms of the number of Regents and or AP or IB exams, as well as what the experiences are in each individual classes. I've mentioned this last week, and I'll say it again. The days of high school existing as a series of silos, where there's the English silo, the social studies silo, the math and the science silo, and the students hop from subject to subject, are long gone. It's too complicated, the stakes are too high, and as a result, the school has to operate differently. If the student is experiencing those on any given day, those teachers need to collaborate as well, so that student's experience is being coordinated, both in terms of what they learn, how they learn, when it's assigned. This is not a perfect science. It's a complicated scenario. As we've said, there are students with any number of different schedules. However, we try to standardize those experiences and are working, especially in recent years, to look at workload, to look at balance, to look at when students are being administered exams, to horizontally throughout the year, to best of our ability, to see if we could make it at least more user-friendly so that they're focusing on specific areas as the need arose.
Let John talk about himself right now, which
So
is not
John
something
Murphy-
he usually does.
John Murphy is yet another student, and again, to say that we haven't covered all the different options and possibilities is an understatement. This is a special education student who has an IEP, one of several different possibilities, even within that designation. For this student, they started in 9th and 10th grade as an inclusion student, academic enrichment, and their special education teacher pushes into their core classes. This student, either because of self-designation or achievement, gravitated from that and switched to resource room, which is one area less restrictive in 11th grade, because they didn't need the one-on-one help from their special education teacher in the classes. It is, I wouldn't say common, but it is fairly prevalent that a student like that, by their senior year, will either stay in resource room or may even switch to a consultant model. Because of the services that they're receiving and the compensatory strategies, the student is learning to be more and more independent throughout their high school career. Again, this student is dabbling in a variety of different electives as well as the core curriculum, musically inclined, looking at business courses, taking American Sign Language, took 1 year of film, and is taking an AP Statistics. This is a broader array of elective courses and experiences. I don't see any harm in being an undecided major in college for the first 2 years. I mean, they have the rest of their lives to find out who they are. It's great that they hit the ground running and know exactly what they want to do, but sometimes that's not true. So in this case, the student is still finding themselves. Maybe they do by the end find that they're looking for something in the arts. For instance, wind ensemble and film maybe speaks to them directly. But again, it's about the sequences. It's about those classes where they're as heterogeneous as possible in core subject areas, and then the options become more complex and more divergent throughout the 11th and 12th grade, throughout their career. Increasingly more choices, increasingly more decisions, increasingly more opportunities to level up or find their own niche as the need arose. I apologize if I'm leaving out 5 different options that you're thinking of in your head right now. We could go through these ad infinitum, but the goal is to give you a sense, a palette for what some of the possibilities are.
So who is in our senior class? So just to give you an idea of how many students are enrolled in some of those different paths, we have about 32% of our seniors enrolled in our arts program, whether that's, like we said, IB Art, IB Film, IB Theater. BOCES Barry Tech, we have about 6% of our seniors going to a BOCES Barry Tech program. Again, that's the CTE, the career and technical education programs that are outside of Southside High School, but they do that for half a day. We have about 39% involved in our business program. And that includes IB Business, but it also includes our marketing, accounting, entrepreneurship, business law courses. And we said it's very popular. As we know, in society in general right now, business is hugely popular among our young people, and that's an area in which they believe they can be successful and happy. And so we have a large number of our seniors enrolled in business. Math, we have about 18%. And when I say math, that doesn't mean students who are taking math. Almost all of our seniors are taking math. It's more those who are really focusing there. Maybe they're taking AP Calculus and AP Statistics or some combination of additional math courses. Science, again, a lot of our students are taking science, but some of them are more focused, whether that's IB Chem, IB Biology, physics, and even the marine biology, forensics. Some students in that area want to focus in science as well. The social sciences, that could include our IB psychology and psychology programs. Tech design, that might mean, like we mentioned before, play production, where they make the sets for these wonderful plays. That might mean music technology, another of our elective courses. So we have about 12% in that area. I'm sorry, 11%. And then generally speaking, we have 42% of our students are going for and are candidates for the IB diploma. Again, that's separate and in addition to their traditional New York State Regents or Advanced Regents diploma, and that's 42% of our senior class, and they could be focusing in any of those areas. In addition, we have about 29% of our senior class are students with disabilities. And again, that can mean that they are focusing in any of these areas and are also potentially IB diploma candidates or not. But just to give you a sense for either of those groups, all of these are interchangeable. Many of these students are focused in different areas. Many of these students are students with disabilities. Many of them are IB diploma candidates or both. And about 88% of our students our 12th graders are taking at least one IB or AP course. And again, that is unique. We recognize the fact that Southside High School is a unique place. And one of the great things about what we do is many of our students get those college course type experiences through IB or AP. And just about all of them, we see that with the 88%. But some who choose to go in a different direction can, as we have 12% not taking IB or AP. So that's just a general sense for our current senior class. Every year there's going to be variations, certainly. But this is a general idea and gives you sort of a feel for where students go. Again, there are all those different branches like we showed earlier. But these are some of the areas they focus in and about how many. So John now is going to talk a little bit about last year's graduating class and just some statistics around that group.
So we're a performance-based service. And looking at the outcomes is more like a snapshot. I look at them less as exit indicators, more as entrance indicators for the next phase of their life. Any one of these statistics or numbers can be a source of pride or an area of concern, depending on your perspective and the lens through which you're looking at it. Yeah, we're a high-performing district, and traditionally that's always been the case. Regents with Advanced Designation was not a goal, it's an indicator of the number of students who are passing through those benchmarks and preparing themselves for life after high school. The IB diploma rate is the success rate, and again, there's another detailed explication of that in Ms. Nisler-Cross's presentation, which will be on the website. The post-secondary percentages are fairly consistent from one year to the next. Students who go on immediately to a four-year university can be between 78 to 85% on any given year. The reasons for that can be multifaceted. The achievements listed in the bottom left-hand corner, if you can read it from there, again, fluctuate. Last year there were 4 National Merit Commended Scholars. This year there were 8. But it's the type of achievement levels that we are looking at. It's a question of whether they're driving the decisions or informing them, and I think that's not a subtle difference. We're entering a new age, a new era, and we don't know what next year is going to look like. I don't know what 3 months from now is going to look like. But we do have to prepare for that life. So what we're looking at is things like we have a lot of support classes that help students every other day for their content areas. Looking at the balance between those and elective courses to make sure that students are balancing their interests with their academic needs. Looking at elective courses and seeing where we need to expand those options, whether it's in technology, world languages, business offerings. Looking at the extent to which students need help. The students today are busier than they've ever been. I get exhausted just looking at some of their schedules, where they're doing this, participating in a varsity sport, or rehearsing for the school musical. God forbid they get a job. When are they starting their homework? Forget about how much do they have in this more and more and more culture. And I'm not making myself immune to those decisions, nor am I telling students that they shouldn't explore those. But we have to live in a realistic world. Wherever possible, can we, in a high-performing district, move some of these requirements into the school day so that they can carry a little bit less at home? The full IB diploma candidate, can we offer them resources in the building to work on those external components? This is not a magic wand. This is not a crystal ball. We're novel, and then we're not dealing with the issues that a typical high school student is dealing with today, as well as the successes, as well as the opportunities. The goal really is to balance all of those. Look at these indicators, see what our areas of strength are. That's where our professional development is headed, where different departments are talking to one another, sharing best practices. That's where our programs are headed. I mean, we haven't even explored the core program, for example, which is a life skills program for our students with significant disabilities. They are non-assessed in terms of Regents diplomas, but there's a very rich fabric here at the high school with very many pathways I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying we need to evolve. But there are a lot of different options here that we're constantly exploring and evaluating.
One other thing I'd like to mention, we put those statistics at the bottom, our advanced Regents diplomas, where we are. And you could look at those numbers in many different ways. We try to support the students where they are, what they need. If a student comes and says to us, you know what, I think, I discussed this with my family, I need to take a different route than the advanced Regents diploma. For some students, that's an okay decision and that makes sense. Some students don't need to necessarily take the IB or AP exam like I mentioned earlier. That's okay. There are different paths for different students. And one other point I want to make is that, the one about our college acceptance rates. I mentioned this at a recent board meeting. We want to look at what our goals are as a district, and Mr. Murphy mentioned them in the beginning. What are our goals? These are just some benchmarks. College acceptance rates at 2- and 4-year schools, students who are happy after they leave here, are successful in their college program or wherever they might be. And so we're continually looking at trying to gather that information from those students as they come back, as we speak to them, and we continually want to do that in a more organized way to understand where they are, have they been successful, is that due to what they've done here at Southside High School, and what we need to tweak and change and evolve as we move forward based on those. So we're constantly looking at that as well, looking back to seeing what we can do better and different if the need arises.
Yeah, so I apologize for the brevity and the breakneck speed through which we passed through this. Each one of these deserves more detail, as do you. So it's jmurphy@rvcschools.org, 255-8820, or a school guidance counselor or an administrator. These can't be the end of conversations. They're supposed to be the starters of them. This will be on the website tomorrow. Right, Mr. Lichter? Right. As part of an ongoing discussion, which will continue to Wednesday's board meeting, and then we'll plan the next one in March. So I thank you for your indulgence, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. I would encourage anyone who's not familiar with all of those options that were presented on the tree of courses and electives to look through the program planning guide, which is linked from the Counseling Center section of the Southside High School website, where you'll find descriptions and not just titles of all the courses available. And PTA Council thanks you for your attendance and for your information. And one of our hopes in having a series of these shorter presentations is to use your feedback and questions to inform our next presentation. So Heather is in the back with index cards and pens. If you could write down any thoughts, questions, topics that you would like to see covered in our next workshop, that's enormously helpful to us as we put together future events. Thank you.